Jesse was dying of thirst, and by nightfall, the water that saved him would change his life forever. Because 5 days lost in New Mexico territory, canteen, dry since sunup, he stumbled onto a hidden river guarded by 18 Apache warriors with arrows already drawn, and the price for touching it was marriage to a chief's daughter who despised him on sight. This is Jesse's story. Late summer 1874, New Mexico territory, where 190 years of unbroken tradition was about to reach across a hidden river and close around a stranger who only wanted a drink of water. Before that same season turned, that stranger would stand between an entire Apache camp and a gang of horse thieves riding in to burn it to the ground. Stay with us to the end, because the way this story turns is not the way you think. 5 days earlier, Jesse Coleman had been a simple man with a simple plan. 32 years old, no kin left anywhere in Texas worth writing to, he had sold what little he owned and pointed his horse west, chasing word that California ranches were paying good wages to any man who knew how to gentle wild stock. And Jesse knew horses. He had known them since before he could properly walk, had broken his first colt at 11 years old, and there wasn't an animal alive that couldn't be taught calm by his hand sooner or later. The trouble, as it turned out, wasn't the horses. It was the map. The map he had bought off a trader in El Paso was worthless. Its trails leading to canyons that didn't exist and rivers that had dried up a decade before he was born. Somewhere past the third day, Jesse knew for certain that he was lost, properly lost, the kind of loss that swallowed men whole in this country and left nothing behind but a horse and a hat for somebody else to find. His canteen had gone dry on the second morning after that. His lips had split. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Tucker, had started stumbling by midday from a thirst neither of them could afford anymore. By the fifth day, the desert had stopped looking like anything at all. Red rock blurred into red sky, and Jesse's own thoughts came to him, slow and strange. The way a man's mind goes when his body starts deciding things without asking him first. He was already saying his goodbyes in his head, to Texas, to California, to the life he'd meant to build with 2 hands and a rope. When Tucker's ears came up sharp and the gelding broke into a trot he shouldn't have had left in him. Animals don't lie about water. Jesse followed. What he found between 2 walls of red stone stopped his heart clean. A river, narrow and impossibly clear, wound through the rock like something that had wandered in from another world entirely. Green grew thick along its banks, cottonwoods and grass so out of place in that burnt country that for a moment Jesse was certain the heat had finally taken his mind. No fence marked it, no sign, no trail worn by cattle or wagons, no boot print in the mud. Just silence and the small, patient sound of moving water. He knelt and drank until his stomach ached, and it was the sweetest thing he had ever tasted in his life. Then he looked around once more. Nothing. Nobody, just wind and rock and the hush of a place that felt, if he let himself think it, like it was holding its breath. Jesse pulled off his boots, dropped his hat on the bank, and waded in fully dressed because a man who has been dying of thirst for 2 days does not stop to ask a river for permission. The water closed over him, cold and perfect, and every knotted muscle in his back let go at once. He floated on his spine with his eyes shut, dust and misery dissolving off him in threads. And for 1 full minute, the world had no California in it. No dead trail, no debts, nothing but the river holding him up. Then he heard it, a small, deliberate click, the sound of a bowstring drawn taut and locked. Jesse's eyes flew open, and his heart went still in his chest. They rose out of the rocks as though the rocks themselves had grown men. 18 Apache warriors, bows lifted, arrows knocked and pointed straight at the water, where he stood chest deep and utterly exposed. They had not stumbled onto him. They had been there the whole time, waiting, watching a stranger bathe in something Jesse had no name for yet. He raised both hands slow, water running off his forearms. "I don't want any trouble." Jesse kept his hands raised, his voice low and careful. "I only needed water. I'll be gone within the hour, I swear it." No one lowered a bow. No one moved at all. The faces ringing him weren't full of hate. Not exactly. It was something stranger than that. Surprise tangled up with something close to disbelief. One of the warriors gave a short, sharp whistle, and from among the rocks came an older man, moving with the unhurried authority of somebody who had never once needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. Eagle feathers hung in hair gone iron gray, and his face carried the deep, weathered lines of a great many winters. His eyes, when they found Jesse, were the color of old amber. "Step out of the water." His English was worn smooth by long use, unhurried and certain. Jesse obeyed at once, climbing out with his hands still raised, feeling every bit as foolish and defenseless as a man dripping wet in front of 18 drawn bows has any right to feel. The older man circled him once, slow, studying him, boot to hatless head. "Do you know where you have just bathed, cowboy?" "No, sir. I saw water and I took it. I'm sorry if I've trespassed on something of yours. I truly didn't know." "This is the Vow River." The old man's tone left no room to argue. "I am Taji, chief of the Red Mesa Apache, and you have just either broken or fulfilled a promise nearly 200 years old." Jesse blinked at him, certain he'd misheard. "I beg your pardon?" Taji lifted one hand, and the bows came down. Not away, only down, the arrows still nocked and ready. "An old law of my people holds that only one man may ever enter these waters. The man fate has chosen to become the husband of my daughter." For a moment, Jesse's whole world simply stopped turning. "What?" "You heard me plainly. For 6 generations, this river has belonged to whoever destiny sends to it. The elders watch from the ridge. My warriors watch from the rocks. Every soul here bore witness. You entered, it is done." "But it was an accident." Jesse's voice rose despite himself. "I didn't know this place existed an hour ago. I just needed water." "Fate does not concern itself with accidents," said a voice sharp enough to cut leather. A young woman stepped out from among the warriors, and they parted for her the way a crowd parts for someone whose authority nobody questions. She stood tall, spine straight as a rifle barrel, her black hair bound in a heavy braid strung with turquoise beads. Fine, careful leatherwork covered her from shoulder to knee, and a ceremonial knife hung at her hip like she knew exactly how to use it. Her dark eyes, fixed on Jesse, burned with a fury she wasn't bothering to hide. "Father?" She never once looked away from him. "Are you telling me this half-drowned drifter is to be my husband?" "Sayen." Taji's patience held stone steady. "The law says." "The law was made for other men in another age," Sayen cut in. She crossed to Jesse and looked him over with open disdain. "Look at him. He's soaked to the bone. He probably doesn't even know what territory he's standing in." "Now hold on a minute." Jesse finally found his voice. "I didn't ask for any of this either, miss. Point me toward my horse and I'll ride off and you'll never see my face again." "No one is going anywhere." Taji's voice carried enough weight that even Sayen went quiet. "Sayen, the cowboy comes with us to the camp. The council will decide his fate at dawn, but I will remind you both. His gaze turned grave. The last time this law was set aside by pride, our crops failed for 3 years running. I will not gamble this tribe's fortune on anyone's wounded feelings, mine included. Jesse looked from the chief to the furious young woman beside him and found the exact same expression staring back from both of them, plain, unguarded horror. The warriors gathered his boots and hat, walked him back to Tucker, and the whole party turned toward the hidden camp. Jesse's borrowed horse falling into step behind Sayen's, her eyes burning holes into his back the entire ride. This has got to be a nightmare, Jesse thought grimly. It wasn't, and what Jesse could not have possibly guessed was that this one accident at the river was about to save an entire tribe from a danger none of them could see coming yet. The camp revealed itself after nearly 2 hours of winding through canyon and red rock, tucked into a valley so well hidden behind natural stone walls that Jesse knew he never would have found it alone in 100 years of looking. When the party rode in, every bit of activity in the camp froze at once. Women grinding corn looked up mid-motion. Children stopped running. Elders rose slowly from the shade to see for themselves. It's him. An old woman's voice carried just loud enough for Jesse to hear. The man from the river. After so many years. Another voice rose from the crowd. The vow is fulfilled at last. Jesse felt like a man walking onto a stage where every soul present knew the script but him. Sayen rode ahead of the whole procession, back rigid, never once glancing behind her. They came to the center of the camp, a wide ring of stones marking a gathering place, and Taji dismounted and lifted a single hand. Silence dropped over the crowd like a curtain. People of the Red Mesa, his voice rang out. Today we have witnessed something none among us has seen since my own grandfather's time. A man has entered the Vow River. The old promise has come due. A ripple of talk moved through the gathered crowd. Some faces lit with wonder, some folded in doubt. This is Jesse, a cowboy out of Texas. Taji pressed on. He did not know our ways. He did not know what he walked into. But the elders saw him from the ridge. My warriors saw him with their own eyes. We cannot unsee what the whole camp witnessed together. Jesse swung down off Tucker, feeling every eye in the valley on him at once. A small girl darted close and poked at his boot with one curious finger, as if checking he was real, before her mother pulled her back with an apologetic half-smile. The council will gather at first light, Taji announced. Until then, Jesse is our guest. Let no hand be raised against him. What the river has chosen, we do not argue with. Sayen finally turned to face him. For half a breath, something more complicated than anger crossed her eyes, something closer to pain, before she turned without a word and walked toward one of the larger tents at the camp's edge. Come, Taji motioned for Jesse to follow. I will show you where you'll sleep tonight. He led Jesse to a small, well-made tent lined with furs, a smoke hole cut into its peak. It was modest but finer than most places Jesse had bedded down on the trail west. Rest. Taji's tone left no room for questions. Food will be brought. Do not try to run. My warriors guard every path out of this valley, and the desert at night is a far crueler jailer than any of us. I'm not running. Jesse held his ground. But I need you to hear me plain, Chief Taji. I didn't come out here hunting a wife. I didn't come hunting trouble of any kind. I only wanted a drink of water. Taji studied him a long moment and nodded slowly. I believe you, and perhaps that is precisely why you are the right man. Those who chase power rarely deserve it. Those who chase love rarely find it that way. but a man who only wanted water. He turned to go. May find he's been handed exactly what he needed, long before he understood he needed it at all. Alone in the tent, Jesse pulled off his still damp boots and sat with his head in his hands. 12 hours ago, his greatest worry had been which fork in a bad road led toward California. Now he was bound to a camp of strangers, promised to a woman who wanted nothing to do with him, over a tradition he barely understood. Definitely wasn't the plan, Jesse grumbled to the empty tent. An older woman brought him venison stew, warm cornbread, and a full skin of water sometime later, setting it down without a word before slipping back out. Jesse ate slow, listening to the camp settle around him, children's laughter fading, low voices trading stories by firelight, somewhere the soft crackle of a bonfire catching. When he'd finished, he stepped outside into a sky-bruised orange and red, with the last of the sunset. He found Sayen sitting alone on a wide, flat stone at the edge of camp, staring west at nothing in particular. For a moment, Jesse thought better of it and nearly turned back toward his tent, but something in the set of her shoulders pulled him forward instead. "Mind if I sit?" "It's a free territory." She didn't turn. More or less. He sat, careful to leave a wide, respectful gap between them. They stayed quiet a long while, watching the light bleed out of the western hills. 25 years. Sayen's voice dropped, lower now, tired in a way it hadn't been all day. "For 25 years I've lived under this promise like a storm cloud that never breaks. Every man my father ever brought through this camp, every alliance another band tried to strike, there was always that one unspoken question hanging over it. Is this him? Is this the day?" Jesse stayed quiet, only listening. "I learned to ride better than half the warriors here. I learned to track, to hunt, to read the stars better than most. I made myself strong and useful and impossible to overlook, thinking if I proved my worth loud enough, my father would finally let the old law die quiet. He didn't. He can't." "He can't," Jesse's tone gentled. Sayen looked at him at last. "Not because he's cruel. My father is the wisest man I've ever known, but he's a prisoner of that promise the same as the rest of us. 16 years ago there was a drought that nearly broke this camp in half. The elders believed it happened because the vow had gone too long unanswered. Since that season, my fate's been sealed, and now, here you are." Jesse let out a long breath. "A dumb cowboy who just wanted a drink of water." The faintest ghost of a smile crossed her face, gone almost before it arrived. "A dumb cowboy who didn't even know where he was standing." "For what it's worth," Jesse held her gaze, "I don't want this any more than you do. Nothing personal in it. I had a plan. California, a fresh start, and none of it included marrying a stranger because I waded into the wrong river. At least we agree on something." Sayen rose to her feet. "Tomorrow the council decides. Maybe they find a way to set this promise aside without bringing ruin down on us. Maybe not." Her eyes hardened with resolve. "But understand me now, Cowboy. If there truly is no way out of this, do not expect a quiet, obedient wife. You don't know me yet. When you do, you'll learn I don't bend easily for anyone. I wouldn't expect anything less of you." Jesse meant every word of it. She gave one short nod and walked off toward her own tent. Jesse sat alone as the first stars broke through overhead, the camp settling into its evening rhythm around him. Fires lit, families gathered close. Somewhere a low song rising and falling in a language he didn't know. It was, he thought, a beautiful place, peaceful on its surface, And yet something ran tense beneath all of it. Something he didn't understand yet, but could feel all the same, like a held breath waiting to be let go. Jesse slept poorly. Every sound in the camp woke him, a horse stamping somewhere, low voices passing, wind working at the tent skins. When the first gray light came through the smoke hole, he was already awake and staring at it. The same older woman brought warm tortillas and a bitter herbal tea, and this time she lingered a moment, studying him with eyes that were kind, even if her face gave little away. "The council waits on you once you've eaten," her tone gentled. "Do not be afraid. The elders are wise people." Jesse thanked her with a nod and ate quickly, more out of habit than appetite, before stepping outside into a camp already fully awake. Women moved between cook fires, children darted underfoot, and warriors checked bowstrings and blades with unusual care. Jesse noticed the worry etched into more than a few faces, low conversations breaking off whenever he passed too close. A young warrior fell into step beside him. "Follow me. The council is gathered." He was led to the ring of stones at the camp's heart, where 5 elders sat in a wide half-circle with Taji at its center. Sayen stood off to one side, arms folded, jaw tight. Around the circle, close to 40 people had gathered to see what the council would decide. "Come forward, Jesse of Texas." Taji's voice carried across the circle. Jesse walked to the center of the ring, the weight of every gaze pressing down on him at once. One elder, a man bent with what looked like nearly 80 winters behind him, went first, his voice startlingly strong for a man his age. "I have seen many seasons. I watched my own grandfather speak of this vow when I was a boy no taller than a rifle. It was never a whim. It was a pact struck with the spirits of this land." Another elder took up the thread. "For 6 generations, no man entered that river. It was forbidden, protected, until yesterday. The question before us is simple." An elder woman with hair pure white leaned forward. "Was this chance, or was it fate? Is this the man meant to join our people?" Taji rose. "Elders, people of Red Mesa, before we speak further of my daughter's marriage, there is something I have kept quiet too long." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Sayen's head turned sharp toward her father, plainly caught off guard. "In recent moons, our scouts have brought hard news. A band of thieves operates north of here. Not Apache, not settlers, outlaws answering to no law and no name but their own. They have already struck 3 camps this season." Several warriors nodded grimly, and Jesse understood at once that this wasn't news to any of them but him. "And the worst of it," Taji went on, "is that they have found our greatest treasure." "Treasure?" Jesse couldn't help himself. "Our horses." Taji's jaw tightened. "For 4 generations, this tribe has bred the finest stock in the territory. Fast, strong, built to last. They are worth a fortune to the right buyer, and these thieves know it well. They have been watching us, waiting on their moment." Sayen finally broke in. 3 nights passed. They tried to run off 9 of our horses. We drove them back, but they got away with 3. They will return. We all know it. We have good warriors." One of the elders shook his head. "But not enough of them, and these thieves come well armed and many. If they strike in force, we stand to lose everything we've built." Jesse began to see the shape of it. "And you think I can be of use to you?" Taji met his eyes directly. "A man of your trade knows horses, knows how outlaws think, how they move, how they scout. But more than that, if you join this family, you become one of our own in the eyes of the towns nearby. You can ride into Copper Bend, speak with the sheriff, ask for help where we cannot. The distrust runs too deep for our own people to cross that line alone. My father speaks true. Sayen stepped forward. We have lived apart, protected mostly by how well this valley is hidden. But they have found us now. We need allies who can move freely between both worlds. Jesse turned it over fast in his mind. So this was never only about an old promise. This was about survival. The vow brought you to us exactly when we needed you most. The white-haired elder folded her hands. Some would call that coincidence. Others would call it fate finishing what it started. Jesse looked to Sayen. She held his gaze steady, and for the first time he saw something new in her eyes. Not affection, not even friendship yet, but a hard, practical respect. The recognition of two people staring down the same danger from opposite sides. If I agree to this, Jesse chose his words slowly, what exactly do you expect of me? First, Taji ticked it off on his fingers, that you help protect our horses. Second, that you use your standing beyond this valley to bring us aid. Third, that you treat my daughter and this people with the respect they are owed. We are not asking you to pretend love you don't feel. Sayen kept her tone flat and clear. We are asking you to be part of the solution, to help us live through this. Jesse took a long breath. He thought of California, of the plan he'd carried 500 miles on a bad map, of the freedom he'd pictured for himself on the far side of a mountain range he'd never crossed. Then he thought of these people, the food they'd shared with a total stranger, the kindness underneath their suspicion. I have conditions, Jesse finally decided. Speak them. Taji gave a short nod. First, I want the full truth of what we're facing. How many men, how they operate, what they're armed with. Second, if I'm to help defend this camp, I need room to make my own tactical calls. Third, he looked at Sayen. Your daughter and I need to be able to work side by side without this turning into a war of its own. I can work with anyone if the goal is clear. Sayen kept her voice cold and even with you. The elders exchanged a long look. Finally, the eldest nodded slowly. I see the hand of fate in this plainly. A stranger arrives at the very hour we need him, carrying exactly the skill we lack. I accept this. One by one, the rest of the council nodded their agreement. Taji rose. Then it is settled, Jesse of Texas. We welcome you into this family. The joining will take place in 6 days' time. Until then, you and Sayen will work together to prepare our defenses. A quiet ripple of applause moved through the gathered crowd. Not celebration exactly, but something close to hope taking root. If you're enjoying how this story is turning, tap join beside the channel name to become a member. It's the simplest way to help keep these Wild West romances coming week after week. Jesse and Sayen looked at each other across the circle. Neither one smiled, neither pretended at happiness they didn't feel, but there was an understanding settling between them now, a shared mission where there had only been resentment the day before. I need to see these horses. Jesse was already moving. Understand exactly what it is we're protecting. Follow me then. Sayen was already turning. As they crossed toward the corrals, Jesse felt something shift under his boots. He was no longer a prisoner of an old promise. He was a partner in a fight for survival, not the romance the elders half believed fate had arranged, but something far more real. Two very different people bound together by necessity, staring down the same danger. And maybe, Jesse thought, that was worth more than destiny ever could be. The corral sat at the valley's northern edge. tucked behind a natural half-ring of stone. Jesse stopped dead the moment he laid eyes on them. 24 horses, maybe more. Every one of them a small miracle of careful breeding. Coats that caught the light like polished wood, clean muscle, sharp, intelligent eyes tracking every movement around the fence. Jesse had worked horses his whole life and had never once seen a herd like it. Impressive, isn't it? For the first time, real pride warmed Sayen's voice. There's something else entirely. Jesse eased toward the fence, and a black stallion drifted over to sniff at his open palm without a hint of fear. How long did it take to breed this line? 4 generations. My great-grandfather started with 2 wild horses nobody else wanted. Every generation after, only the best bred forward. Speed, strength, endurance, temperament, all of it. Jesse let out a low whistle. They're worth a fortune to the right buyer. No wonder those thieves want them bad enough to risk this valley. Sayen leaned her forearms on the top rail. The 3 they took were among our finest. They'll sell in Mexico or further off for more money than most men see in a lifetime. Tell me everything you know about these men. Sayen's shoulders squared. 12 of them, led by a man they called Dutch Marrow. Half outlaw, half ghost. He knows his territory near as well as we do. Knows how the tribes move. Knows how to slip past a posse without leaving a trail. My father sent messengers to talk terms once. They never came home. Her voice went hard as flint. That tells you everything worth knowing about Dutch Marrow. Jesse turned it over. So there's no reasoning with them. We can only outthink them or outfight them, and we don't have the numbers to outfight them. Numbers don't always win the fight, Sayen countered. No, Jesse agreed, circling the corral, studying the ground and the rock walls around it. Sometimes wits do. When do you expect them back? Soon? Maybe this week. Our scouts saw movement in the northern hills only yesterday. Good. Jesse rubbed his jaw, thinking hard. I'll need a fast horse, 2 days of provisions, and the best map anybody in this camp can draw me. Sayen looked at him with open suspicion. Where exactly are you going? Copper Bend. You mentioned yourself you need someone who can walk in both worlds. Time I put that to use. Copper Bend is 5 hours' ride, and it's no friend to Apache people. I'm not Apache, Jesse pointed out. I'm a cowboy out of Texas. I can talk to them plain. See if there's a sheriff worth his salt who might know something useful about Dutch Marrow's outfit. Sayen went quiet a long moment, weighing him. It's a dangerous ride. Everything about this is dangerous. Sitting here waiting on them to strike first is more dangerous still. I'll ride with you. Her tone was firm. No, 2 of us together draws eyes. A lone cowboy passing through is nothing worth noting. A cowboy riding with an Apache woman at his side is a question every man in that town will stop to ask. Sayen's fists closed at her sides, frustration plain on her face. I don't sit well waiting behind while somebody else does the work. You're not sitting behind. Jesse shook his head. You're running this camp's defenses while I'm gone. I need constant eyes on the hills, escape routes cut and ready, and a plan to move every horse fast if it comes to that. Something sparked behind Sayen's eyes. You mean for us to run this together? We already agreed to be partners, didn't we? Partners play to their own strengths. Yours is knowing this land and leading these people. Mine's knowing how to talk to strangers who'd never trust an Apache camp on sight. For the first time since the river, something that looked like a real smile broke across Sayen's face. Small but genuine. Maybe you're not quite as useless as I first took you for, cowboy. High praise indeed, Jessie drawled, and her smile only widened a fraction before she turned it away. They spent the next 2 hours bent over hide maps spread across a flat rock, Sayen marking every dangerous stretch of trail, naming who in Copper Bend might prove friend and who would sooner turn a rifle on him for keeping Apache company. Jessie committed every word to memory. When they'd finished, Sayen led him to the corral gate and pointed out a caramel mare with a bright white star on her forehead. This is Dawn Runner, fastest horse in this herd. If it comes to running, she will not let you down. Jessie crossed to the mare and let her take his scent. Well, hello there. Ready for a hard ride? The mare snorted softly, almost like an answer. As he worked the saddle onto her back, several warriors drifted over. One, a young man with an old scar across his cheek, pressed a full canteen into his hands. For the road. Another handed him a wrap bundle. My wife made this. Good food for the trail. One after another, small offerings came his way. A honed blade, a clearer hand-drawn map. Quiet advice on the roughest stretches of the route ahead. Jessie understood, watching it happen, that something had already changed. He was no longer the stranger who'd stumbled into their sacred water. He was someone trying to help. Taji arrived just as Jessie gathered the reins to mount. Ride careful, son of this family. A small smile broke through his usual gravity. You are one of ours now. That means your life matters to a great many people in this valley. Jessie nodded, surprised by the sudden thickness in his own throat. I'll bring back whatever help I can find. He swung up into the saddle. Sayen stepped close, resting a hand on Dawn Runner's bridle. Her voice pitched low enough that only he could hear it. Jessie, I know this isn't what either of us planned, but thank you for not running when you had every chance to. I could still run, Jessie tossed back, half a joke. You could. She looked him dead in the eye. But I don't believe you will. I'm starting to think that river knew exactly what it was doing. Before Jessie could find an answer, she stepped back. Ride hard and come home whole. We have a wedding to plan, and I can't very well marry a ghost. Jessie laughed despite himself, touched his heels to Dawn Runner's flanks, and rode out of the valley at a gallop. As Copper Bend's dust rose on the horizon ahead of him, he turned the last 2 days over in his mind, amazed at how completely his whole world had reshaped itself. 3 days back, he'd been a man without a single soul waiting on him anywhere. Now he had a mission, a family holding its breath for his return, and a woman who no longer looked at him like an enemy. It wasn't love, not yet. It might never grow into that. But it was respect, it was partnership, and it felt unexpectedly like the beginning of something worth having. Copper Bend turned out to be exactly the town Jessie expected. Dusty, loud, and thick with the kind of distrust that clings to a place too far from any real law. He rode in as the light went long and gold across the main street. Dawn Runner drew too many eyes, too fine an animal for an ordinary drifting cowboy. So Jessie left her at the livery with strict instructions and a coin pressed into the stable hand's palm to make sure they were followed. He spent 3 careful days working the town, trading small talk with merchants, passing cow hands, the one bartender in Copper Bend worth trusting with a question. Jessie listened more than he talked, and everything he heard confirmed the worst of it. Dutch Marrow was known across 3 counties, feared by most and untouched by any of it, because nobody in this territory wanted to be the next name on his list. The sheriff was old, tired, and likely bought. The kind of lawman who found reasons to look the other way whenever Marrow's business came calling. "You won't find help in this town, friend," a horse trader warned him over a shared drink. "Everybody's heard what Dutch does to folks who cross him, but everybody's got a family to think of, too. Nobody's fixing to risk their neck over some Apache camp out past the Red Rock." But Jesse did walk away with something worth having: information. Marrow ran his outfit out of a canyon to the northwest, 12 men strong, just as Sayen had described. He had a standing buyer across the border paying top dollar for quality horseflesh, and word in town was that he was planning something bigger than another quiet raid. Not simply to take the horses this time, but to burn the camp to nothing and lay claim to the valley itself once the Apache were gone from it. It was worse, far worse than any of them had guessed. Jesse spent what money he had left on ammunition, strong rope, and tools he'd need, then rode back toward the valley on the third day, a plan already taking rough shape in his mind. When he came within sight of camp, half the valley turned out to meet him. Sayen reached his side first. "I thought perhaps you wouldn't come back." Relief was plain enough in her eyes. "I promised you I would." Jesse swung down off Dawnrunner. "Gather everyone. We need to talk, all of us together." An hour later, the council sat again. Every warrior in the camp crowded in close around them. Jesse laid out everything he'd learned, and he watched faces darken with every fresh detail. "We can't win a straight fight," Jesse decided finally. "They outnumber us. They're better armed, and they know this ground nearly as well as we do." "Then what do you propose?" Tazi tilted his head. "That we flee our own home." "No, I propose we hand them exactly what they came for." Confused silence settled over the gathering. "Explain yourself," one elder demanded. Jesse allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Marrow wants the horses. Fine. We're going to let him believe he's got them." For the better part of an hour, he laid out the whole plan, piece by piece, risky, precisely timed, and entirely dependent on Dutch Marrow being exactly as greedy as Jesse suspected he was. Sayen broke the silence first once he'd finished. "It's mad. Completely," Jesse allowed. "But it can work." She turned to her father. "If we execute it exactly right." The elders talked it through a long while before Taji finally rose and nodded. "We will do this. 6 days remain before the joining ceremony. We use every one of them to prepare." The 3 days that followed were a blur of hard, steady work. Jesse and Sayen were rarely apart from sunrise to well past dark, organizing riders into teams, rehearsing every movement of the plan until it ran smooth as water. Somewhere in the middle of all that labor, the two of them stopped being strangers, forced together by an old promise, and became, without either quite noticing the turn, a real team. "You're a sharper strategist than I expected of you," Sayen aloud one night, the fire between them burning low. "And you're a stronger leader than you'll admit to being," Jesse returned. She studied him differently now, something in her eyes that hadn't been there the day he'd waded out of that river, soaked and terrified. "Jesse, about the ceremony tomorrow." He nodded slowly. "I know it. I'm not expecting it to mean what it's meant to mean. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I only want you to know," she searched for the words, "that I'm no longer troubled by the thought of it." The fire had burned low between them by then, and neither one moved to build it back up. If you've made it this far, tap join beside the channel name to become a member. You'll catch every new story the moment it drops. Jesse smiled at that, warmer than he meant to let on. A week ago, you wanted me gone before sundown. A week ago, you were a problem. Sayen almost returned the smile. Now you're a partner. Perhaps with time, something more than that. The morning of the ceremony broke clear and impossibly bright. The whole valley had been dressed overnight in wildflowers and bright woven cloth. The women of the camp laying out a feast since before dawn. Children darting between the tents in a fever of excitement they didn't fully understand yet. Jesse dressed in clothes made new for the day, a careful blend of cowboy leather and Apache craft. And when he stepped from his tent, he found Sayen already waiting. She wore a white leather dress stitched through with turquoise beads and pale shell. Her dark hair loose over her shoulders for the first time since he'd known her. Jesse's breath caught plainly enough that he didn't bother hiding it. "You look beautiful." Jesse meant it, simple and honest. "You don't look half bad yourself." The corner of Sayen's mouth curved. The ceremony itself was simple but heavy with meaning. Taji's words turned on two worlds finding common ground, on two different people bound by more than the promise that had first thrown them together. The elders gave their blessings. The whole camp raised its voice in old songs Jesse didn't understand a word of, but felt clean through his chest all the same. Then came the moment nobody in that valley would soon forget. Sayen presented Jesse with a ceremonial blade that had belonged to her grandfather. "So you always carry a piece of our history with you." Then it was Jesse's turn. "I don't have much to give," he began, "just a cowboy who lost his way and stumbled into something far better than he deserved. But I want to leave this tribe something worth having." From a worn leather satchel he drew a rolled paper and spread it wide for the whole gathering to see. A detailed map, hand-drawn from memory and hard-won information, marking a hidden valley 3 days south. Watered by underground springs and screened entirely from view by natural stone. This valley has water enough for 100 horses. Jesse traced a finger along the map. Grass enough to spare, and no road in that a stranger could stumble onto by chance the way I did. It's a place this herd could grow safe, far from any thief who ever hears rumor of it. A ripple of astonishment ran through the gathered crowd. "That's not all of it." Jesse drew out a second paper. "This is a deed I had filed proper in Copper Bend. That valley is registered now, legal and binding, under the name of the Red Mesa Apache. No court, no company, no man with a rifle can take it from you." The whole camp fell utterly silent. Then Taji found his voice thick with something he wasn't bothering to hide. "Jesse, this is worth more than any gold this territory holds. This isn't only land." Jesse looked to Sayen, then out over the whole gathered camp. "It's a future, security, a promise that this tribe doesn't just survive what's coming, it grows past it. Your horses will run safe. Your children will grow up in peace. You'll hold a piece of ground no one can ever strip away from you again." Sayen's eyes shone bright with tears. She made no effort to blink away. She crossed to him in front of the whole valley and wrapped her arms around him. No ceremony in it, no performance, only real and grateful warmth. "Thank you," her voice was thick against his shoulder, "for seeing past the old promise, for giving all of us something to hope for." The celebration that followed ran nothing like what Jesse had braced himself for. It wasn't only a wedding anymore, it was a whole people starting over. Music rose and fell late into the night. Food and laughter passed hand to hand. Children chased each other wild between the fires. And for the first time in longer than most could remember, real, uncomplicated joy filled that valley end to end. As the sky burned down into evening color, Jesse and Sayen stood together at the edge of camp, watching their people celebrate. "So," Sayen turned to him, "what now?" "Now," Jesse took her hand, "we finish what we started. We stop Dutch Marrow. We keep every one of these people safe." But safety, as it happened, was still 3 nights off. Word came at midnight on the 4th day, a scout riding in hard, breathless, warning that Marrow's riders had been seen moving south along the ridge trail, closer and faster than anyone had planned for. The camp came awake in an instant. Torches lit, every warrior armed and moving to the positions Jesse and Sayen had drilled into them for days. This was no longer a plan on a hide map. This was happening now. Jesse's scheme had one simple, dangerous heart to it. Let Marrow believe he'd won before he ever had. A decoy herd, 12 of the camp's least valuable animals, was driven out into open ground near the canyon mouth under cover of dark, lightly guarded on purpose, bait dressed up to look careless. The real herd, Dawn Runner and the 24 finest animals in the valley, was walked quiet up a narrow game trail into the rocks, out of sight, out of reach, guarded by Sayen and half the camp's warriors in total silence. Jesse took position with the rest, hidden high along the canyon walls above the decoy herd. Rifle steady, heart hammering, despite every hour of preparation behind him. He didn't have to wait long. Dutch Marrow's riders came down out of the dark exactly the way Jesse had gambled they would. Loud, careless, certain they'd caught an unguarded prize. 12 men, just as counted, fanning out around the decoy horses with the easy confidence of men who'd done this a dozen times before and never once paid for it. "Now," Jesse mouthed, and the trap sprang shut. Warriors rose from the rocks on every side at once, bows and rifles trained down into the canyon floor. Torches flared to life along the ridgeline, turning night into a wall of firelight the outlaws hadn't planned for. For one long, frozen second, Dutch Marrow's men sat their horses in the open, with nowhere at all to run. "Drop your weapons." Jesse's voice carried down flat and hard across the canyon. "This valley isn't yours to take." Marrow, a lean, hard-eyed man with a scar splitting one eyebrow, wheeled his horse cursing, and for a moment it looked like he might try to fight his way clear regardless of the odds stacked against him. A shot cracked out from somewhere below, and Jesse felt the wind of it pass close enough to sting. He fired back fast, dropping low behind the rock, and the canyon dissolved into chaos. Gunfire echoing off stone, horses screaming and wheeling in the dark. Warriors moving exactly as they'd rehearsed, cutting off every path out of the canyon one by one. It was over faster than Jesse expected. Boxed in on every side, outnumbered by warriors they'd never even seen coming, 3 of Marrow's men went down before the rest threw up their hands. Marrow himself made a last desperate break for the canyon mouth, and it was Sayen, riding down hard from the rocks with the real herd safely secured behind her, who cut him off, rope singing through the air to drag him from his saddle before he'd gone 20 yards. When the smoke cleared and the last of Marrow's men were bound and disarmed, Jesse found Sayen standing over Dutch Marrow with her father's own rifle leveled steady at his chest, not a shake in her hands anywhere. "You picked the wrong valley." Her voice stayed cold and even. Not a single warrior of Red Mesa had fallen. 2 carried minor wounds, nothing that wouldn't heal clean. By sunrise, Marrow and what remained of his outfit were bound for Copper Bend and the same tired sheriff Jesse had spoken with days before. This time with witnesses enough and evidence enough that no amount of looking away would save him from it. Jesse found Sayen afterward at the corral fence. watching the herd, every single horse accounted for, settle back into the gray morning light. We did it. Jesse let the words settle, quiet, half to himself. We did. She looked over at him, something open and unguarded in her face for the first time since the river. You were right about him. Greed made him careless. It always does in the end. Wasn't only greed that beat him. Jesse shook his head. Wasn't only my plan either. It was every single person in this valley trusting a stranger enough to follow it. Sayen stepped closer. You could still leave, you know. California's still out there, waiting on you, same as it ever was. Nobody in this camp would hold that against you now. You've more than paid whatever debt the river handed you. Jesse looked past her, out over the valley, waking slow in the morning light. Smoke rising soft from cook fires, children already laughing somewhere near the tents, the herd moving easy and safe in the growing sun. He thought of California, the dream he'd carried 500 miles on a worthless map, the fresh start he'd pictured for himself on ground he'd never once set foot on. I think, the words came slow, I already found what I was riding toward. I just didn't know its name till I got here. Sayen's breath caught, plain and unguarded. And what name is that? Yours. Jesse held her gaze. This valley, this family. I'm not looking for California anymore, Sayen. I already found the place I'm meant to be standing. She closed the last of the distance between them, and this time when she reached for his hand, there was nothing left of the fury that had greeted him at the river's edge. Only warmth, hard-won and entirely real. The elders will say the river knew all along. Her voice went soft. Maybe it did. Jesse smiled. I'm just glad I stopped to drink. That evening, with Dutch Marrow's threat broken and the valley safe for the first time in longer than most could remember, Taji gathered the whole camp together once more, beneath a sky gone deep purple and gold. What had begun 6 days earlier as an old law forced on two unwilling strangers closed instead as something neither of them had dared hope for, not a promise kept out of duty, but a marriage chosen freely, in front of the very river that had brought them together. Jesse Coleman never did see California. He built a life instead in a hidden valley in New Mexico territory, at the side of a woman who had once looked at him like an enemy and came in time to look at him like home. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the fires burned low, he liked to say that he'd only ever wanted one thing in this world, the day he waded into that river half dead from thirst. He just hadn't known yet that what he truly needed was already waiting for him on the other side of the water. Thank you for riding all the way to the end of Jesse and Sayen's story. If Wild West romances like this one are your favorite, tap join beside the channel name to become a member. There's a new story waiting for you soon.